In this video, I'm going to be going in depth into this guide I made for some of my friends and some random people. I'll first start off with an overview of the guide, then I'll go into Deep of Night scaling, some of the numbers behind the bosses and the game mode in general. Then I'll be going into boss mechanics, which I think are the most important. Reason being is that in maybe 20-30% of my Depth 5 games, there's one player that really struggles to survive against some of the Everdark bosses in particular. So I'll be spending most of my time in this guide trying to help with getting good at these bosses. It's not just a complete text guide, I included some aura farming clips, so maybe it'll be a little bit more fun that way. Then I'll be going into pathing, which ties a lot into opportunity costs and how you make decisions. This is a really good section for new players, as some of the pathing might seem obvious to some of the hardcore or even casual players, but maybe not for the newer players. And then I'll finish off by going into relics. I honestly don't think they're really that important, but you obviously want to have the best relics to make your runs go easier. And then the fifth section is just an extra section with some of my background and how I tried to get good at aura farming and some of my player stats. So my very first sentence for this guide is boss mechanics and opportunity costs are the two things needed to master Nightreign. Instead of asking you to take that at face value, I'm going to try and spend most of this guide proving that. The guide's also doesn't require spells, relics, specific team comps to win consistently. One of the common recommendations is Evergale and Vader. Specific meta characters like Duchess, Wilder, RNI, Recluse. But I play as Revenant, so I'm going to focus more as a general guide. And it is slightly biased towards Revenant, but my intention is to cover those other characters as well. And another point I want to make is that the way you do DPS to bosses is by hitting the boss frequently. It sounds kind of obvious, but if you pay really close attention to the behavior of your players or even yourself in a fight, hitting the boss a lot is going to help you the most with consistently winning. But it's easier said than done because Depth 5 scaling is punishing. So if we look at Deep of Night scaling, this is a chart provided by some random person on Google Docs. The first thing I want to go over is scaling for Depth 4. The reason why Depth 4 feels like hell, and I also suffered in Depth 4, is because there is a very large damage spike here. From the base game, at Depth 3, the bosses do about double damage, and then at Depth 4, they now do triple damage. So at Depth 3, you could tank some hits with some vigor, some damage negation, but at Depth 4, you need a lot to help you survive. If you also look at the minor boss scaling and the blood scaling, over here on the left, certain Evergales might get 65 or 80% more HP simply by being a blood boss. And that's separate from the Depth of Night scaling. Whereas the formidable bosses, they usually only get plus 15%. So because they get plus 15%, it might be better for you to clear a formidable boss instead of doing a blood Evergale. But there's more nuance to that and opportunity costs. And the bosses are also more aggressive if they're blood versions, so it might cause you to take more time to clear that boss. Another point I want to highlight is that the Night Lords at Depth 5 only have about 2 times their HP from the base game. And if you're an experienced player, you know that the base game is kind of easy once you have all the basic knowledge down and etc. But it's really not that much if you're hitting the boss as much as you were in the base game, face tank everything. But it will feel like the bosses have a lot more HP because the bosses do 3 times their 3.31 times their damage. So you have to play more cautiously. You could get one shot if you don't have enough damage negation, and that will plummet your DPS. So after quickly going through that, I'm going to be spending most of the guide on boss mechanics. Kind of my starting like hook here is, what if I told you you can do two times your damage to Animus and Everdark Gnoster, and the fight's actually not that bad if you just learn one mechanic. And still, many Depth 5 players don't know about that mechanic. I didn't even know about it until I reached Depth 4. I've seen it in solo videos, but I really didn't think about it until I realized how punishing this game mode is. And just knowing like one mechanic can really save your runs. It can save you from team wipes. It can increase your DPS. It can save you from so much suffering from your games. It's also a really boring part of the guide, but like I said, I try to include aura farming with. Before I actually go into the boss mechanics, I'm going to cover general skills that you have to learn for trios. Even if you watch boss analysis videos, they're not going to teach you how to handle certain situations in trios, so I'm going to first cover that. And I'm also going to provide some clips through some of these skills. My number one tip is know what items and passives your teammates are looking for and share them. At the very start of the game, I check the relics of my teammates to get a general idea of what they want, what they need. And it's super important that you do this, because if you don't help your teammates get what you need, they might become useless in your fights. They might drop to 3 bars. You might have to carry them. And you might blame everything on your teammates, but you should probably think about how or if you could have helped them in some way. At depth 5, you might get one shot if you don't share those damage negations, and if they get one shot 3 bar, they're not going to be helping you on the boss. So in general, melees want successive attacks, damage negation, charge attack, damage negation, so they can actually hit the boss and not worry about getting one shot. For example, Wilder, he can just spam his hook or claw twice and cancel it, and then he gets a bubble. A 60% damage negation bubble, which you can't even get from damage negation at full HP, which is capped at 40% at the moment. Well, it's not capped at 40%, but one item gives you 40%, whereas 2 would give you 80, but one item could give you 60% for a successive attack. For squishy characters, at depth 5, you might need you probably need 2 full damage negation, unless you have Vigor on your relics. Usually you can get away with just 1 in depth 4, but you might need to compensate with some other passive items elsewhere. For Revenant and Duchess, casters need shards from the rises. Recluse could use a rise, especially for Shattering Crystal builds. You might not get the Shattering Crystal build as a Recluse, but maybe you or your teammates can get it for you. For Iron Eye, Executor, pretty much any class, you might want a purple smithing stone to upgrade either your base weapon or a blue weapon you find during the game. The reason for that is you get a 20% damage boost from upgrading your blue weapon to purple. However, you might get a better item on the way, and that smithing stone might not be as useful as it is, but you could still use it for a temporary damage boost during the day, even if you get a better item. Even if you get a drop that's not for your class or character, it might still be worth taking. It might still be game changing. For example, if I'm playing Wilder and there's a Revenant on my team, I see a Discs of Light or triple Rings of Light. There's very few items that could replace taking that over giving that weapon to the Revenant. Other weapons would be like the Fire Candlestick for Everdark Caligo, and etc. Number 2, aggro switching. So this is where the fun begins. For aggro switching, this is a skill that you probably won't learn from any other guide, but you will learn by just playing the game. Players still struggle with aggro switching even at depth 5. So I'm going to be going into a depth 3 example here for Heolstor. It's kind of grainy here. Let me fix that. If you look closely, I have aggro on Heolstor. He takes a swipe at me. I'm going to try and get aggro back so he doesn't hit my casters. But if you look closely at the Iron Eye, he is sending arrows at Heolstor. Another arrow at Heolstor. One more arrow at Heolstor, I think. And Heolstor decides to switch to the aggro. Iron Eye's one shot dead. Not enough damage negation. Wasn't paying attention. Wasn't experienced enough. This was a really old video, actually. And then as soon as Iron Eye goes down, Heolstor's going after the Recluse. The Recluse was prepared for it, so the Recluse survives. But that's just like your very bare bones example of how you really should think about aggro switching. You have to be prepared either when someone gets downed or if you start hitting the boss frequently. Even if you have less likely to be targeted against certain bosses like Heolstor or Fulghor, Fulghor will still decide to do a 180 snipe and one-shot your caster if he wants to. Sometimes you can dodge even if you don't have aggro. It helps with getting crossfired, but if you do dodge, you are lowering your DPS a bit. But for certain attacks, which you'll see later, it might be worth just like preparing for the worst. For reviving the one down player, I'll be going into clip 3. So if one of your teammates gets downed, the other teammate should be holding aggro with the boss as best as they can. But there's actually a few more things that go into reviving your teammates this way. As soon as I start reviving my teammates, the boss is very likely to switch aggro back to you. You get a couple of options here, and I cover this in the next bullet point. You could continue reviving if you're confident, or you can run away. A lot of newer players will run away as soon as the boss switches aggro. That's fine if your teammate is up close and can finish off the revive. But if you get really good at your boss mechanics, you can kind of aura farm and dodge the boss while reviving them. I know I have a successive bubble here. I have a damage negation at full HP. Even if the boss hits me at depth 5, I can tank that hit, no problem. So I'm going to go and try an aura farm by picking this guy up. Dodge, grab, I know how to dodge all these. When he does the grab, I have like, he has a brief delay when he's going to do another attack, so I can just finish this revive off without having to worry about that attack. Now he's going to do the attack. I'm going to prepare by dodging because I've been watching the boss the whole time. And you might notice here, there are flames left over. These flames can actually damage you, and they're kind of hard to see. So I'm using tip number, let's see here. Tip number 8 here, where the bosses have lingering AoE's effects that will damage you. And I'm using another tip I mentioned. Where is it? Some players building muscle memory by preparing for the worst, by dodging even when you don't have aggro. I think I still have aggro in that clip, but I'm far away enough where I can walk away, but I'm just gonna dodge just to make sure I don't get hit by these flames, because they hurt. Iron Eye goes for an ult, panics, that's fine. After you do that, he should run away and just maybe take a breather, but he goes for the mark, that's pretty good. And he's dead again. So usually if you get revived, you might want to just take a breather and just walk away if you can. Going for the mark there was fine, as long as he was prepared to dodge the next attack, but he wasn't. But that's fine. This boss is hard. So there's aggro switching, reviving one down player, all covered in one clip. And then number 4 is kind of just a repeat, reviving your teammates while dodging the boss at the same time. That's like the really big skill that you need to learn to solo carry and aura farm. And like it's covered in clip 2, 3, 4. Certain characters are better at doing it. I cover some of the numbers behind it here. You only need 40 revive damage for the first bar, but you need 240 to deplete all 3 bars. So it's tougher and tougher. And you can really go into the numbers here if you want. Characters like Wilder will have to melee for 1 bar and ult 2 bars. Duchess might melee 1 bar or have invisibility from her ultimate for 2 bars. Raider ults for 1 bar, melee on the totem, but you probably have to dodge while on the totem too. Revenant, as you can see in these clips, I have summons and melee that I can use. I can ult and pick up both teammates at 3 bars with decent range. I can drop my claws for other characters so that they can use for one of the fastest revives in the game. That's just due to Revenant having a slower moveset with her claws, and her claws having a bonus revive damage. Guardian has shield poke, shockwaves, relics, his ults, same as Revenant, pretty much. Recluse has a really weak ult, but it also has extreme range. And the catch with your ult is that your iframe doesn't last that long, so you can die like right after your animation. You also have Cannon of Haima, which might be the best revive in the game, but that requires RNG to get that. And other characters can use it too, not just Recluse. So for Recluse, if you want to solo carry, you might be better off just soloing the rest of the boss, due to her high DPS. If you're comfortable, you can melee and revive your teammates at the same time. But usually, if you're a Recluse, you're focused on casting and maybe finishing that 20% HP of the boss that is left over might be the better way to carry your teammate. For Iron Eye, you can ult for 2 bars at far range. You usually just finish it off with your bow, but you can also melee to use your mark skill. I also really recommend ranged characters learning how to dodge bosses at close range, just so you can revive your teammates while being under pressure. The reason for this is Deep of Night gives you way less room for error than the people who have played the base game a lot. So this is where supplemental guides like boss analysis videos, hitbox analysis videos can really help you with understanding how to dodge certain bosses. Especially with the 30-40 minute runbacks in the game, and some people not liking the solo version of the game. But just knowing them isn't enough. It'll help you a lot, but master trios, you just have to play the game and think about specific situations like these. I guess I'll just go over this Fulghor one. Everyone thinks Fulghor is a really easy boss, and I would rate him at one of the easiest boss for good reason, but because of these Deep of Night modes being way tougher on scaling, he's not the easiest boss. It doesn't feel like the easiest boss, at least. So for this clip, I'll be covering bullet point number 5. I recommend turning off your camera lock-on entirely when reviving teammates. Watch the boss when you're reviving your teammate. And this clip is a prime example of how that can help you. So I know Fulghor's coming. I'm going to revive my teammates. A lot of new players will lock onto their teammates so that they can aim their weapon and revive your teammates and hope that the boss doesn't swipe at them before they revive their teammates. Well, this guide isn't really about hoping, it's about aura farming. So, especially when some of these revive bars take 240 revive damage, hoping isn't going to save you runs most of the time. So I'm watching the boss, camera lock on off. I've dodged this Fulghor attack plenty of times, no problem for me. It looks really cool for them, but it's just a regular day for me because I've played the game so much. Dodge that. He's still not doing anything for 2 or 3 seconds because he's running to me. I can finish off this rebuy. Now, another thing I could do is I could keep reviving my Guardian. But since I know attack is coming, I'm just going to dodge it anyway just to be safe. Not worth risking it. And then another thing I could do is keep reviving my teammate with my Guardian. And I know how to dodge this attack, but I'm just going to play it safe and run away because Guardian has ways to survive with his physical block. I'm going to throw a Discus of Light to help revive my teammates. And then Fulghor decides to do one of his scariest attacks, which is the 10-hit swing. So most people will fold here, but if you understand this boss mechanic well, you can dodge it pretty consistently. And it's actually slightly easier than you think it might be. It really needs 2 dodges and a surge sprint. So dodge, I'm just spamming dodge there after the first swing. Let me go back. 1, 2, and now you don't have to worry about the swings at all. You surge sprint away. I don't surge sprint away because I'm trying to R farm a bit more and dodge it while looking backwards, but luckily I have enough vigor and damage negation to tank 2 hits. So yeah, don't do that. Just surge sprint away. For number 6, I recommend you play the character you're most comfortable with instead of trying to balance the team composition, especially balancing for certain Night Lords. The main reason why I recommend you play the character you're most comfortable with is because character mastery matters a lot. It's going to be really hard for me to climb all the way from 0 to Def 5 999 as a Guardian. Even though I'm so familiar with the game, it's going to be easier for me than other people because I have an idea of what Guardian needs, but to actually mechanically do it, it's going to be really difficult for me. There are certain characters that are really broken in Deep of Night, and they would be Iron Eye, Duchess, Recluse. Wilder kind of counts because he can help balance the team in many ways, and he's actually one of the best aura farming characters. But in my opinion, you don't need specific characters, any specific team comp, or anything for these bosses, even at Depth 5. Guardian can do damage with the right setup. Guardian can tank and do damage with the right setup. People get hit all the time at Depth 5. And you can climb by just playing one character only, no matter what the Night Lord is. The reason why I say this is because if you don't main one of those top characters like Iron Eye, Duchess, or Recluse for DPS, there's a pretty good chance you're just going to get some okay damage composition, but that's perfectly fine. I play as Revenant, I might get Wilder, Executor, but it's not going to be a big deal to me because I'm familiar with the boss mechanics and what everyone needs. There could be a few exceptions to this rule, though, but I still kind of disagree with them. The one exception would be Everdark Caligo. Everdark Caligo has a Frost ultimate that reduces your Frost resistance every time it triggers Frostbite. As you might imagine, as time goes on, you're going to be taking more and more damage faster, and you're going to burn your heals through that. And it's pretty much an unavoidable attack. There is a way to avoid the attack, which is iframing from your ultimates, but most of the time you're going to get hit by it, and it's unavoidable. However, certain classes like Wilder, Iron Eye, and some of the other classes like Raider, which can break the poise of Caligo, they can actually cancel Caligo's Frost ults. So you don't have to deal with that Frostbite at all. So some players will swap to Wilder and Iron Eye specifically just to counter Caligo that way. I used to think that was the best way, but I've changed my mind recently. The reason being is even at depth 5 scaling, if you have a ton of fire weapons, you can break her stance and her armor really often, and by breaking her armor, you're going to do a ton of damage. You don't really need relic setups to do that. Breaking her armor with a bunch of fire or a bunch of spells that can target certain pieces of her armor can really make the fight go that much easier. And The reason why I say this is because I've won so many Depth 5 games as Revenant without those two characters or with them missing the cancel. So for me, it's more of a fire application check than a character or DPS raise. And if you want to be a balanced character, there's nothing wrong with that. It's actually a pretty good thing. You can be a pretty solid teammate that way. But character mastery can make a huge difference, more than you think. Even though they have a limited amount of items and skills, ultimates, just knowing certain specific things about your character and what you are capable of can help a lot. A lot of people hate playing with Guardian because he's not a DPS character, but a good Guardian with the right build for surviving the affinity damage and doing some damage with constantly poking the boss and maintaining aggro can actually be really good for your team. And certain classes like Dagger Duchess can do 300, 500 damage per swing of their dagger, but they also have to avoid getting downed, and they also have to have a high uptime to match the sorcery builds, for example. For number 7, this is a common complaint for lower depths and newer players, and it does seem pretty bad. And it is bad because sharing aggro is a way to make the game much easier for you to clear. But for me, I would try and think of this as a way you can kind of practice your bosses a bit more. Due to less aggro sharing, you're going to get more time to dodge boss mechanics, and at lower depths, it's going to be way less punishing than depth 4 or depth 5. So this is a really good time for you to learn and get used to the bosses, especially if you're a newer player. It's gonna suck not being able to play trios a lot because people are rage quitting, but again, you probably don't want a rage quitter as your teammate anyway. And to prove that you can still make it with duos with bad items, etc., I disconnects. I still won a depth 5 Adel fight with just me, a blue black flame, and a dual greatsword duchess. So you might not be able to win because you're not comfortable with the bosses, but you could get comfortable with the bosses when your teammate quits. Um, it's not great, but there's actually a silver lining, which you can spend a lot of time getting used to the bosses before going into depth 4 and 5 and just 3-barring after every attack, like some of my teammates do. And number 8, I already covered earlier. It's just a lot of these boss attacks have lingering AoEs, effects, elements. They'll damage you. Some of the map AoEs have like a travel time. So you actually have to dodge the shockwave instead of the initial slam, depending on how far you are from the boss, etc. You'll see them in some of the clips as well. Boss resistances are a little bit weird in Nightreign, and I think the prime example of that would be Libra. In game, his icon is a frenzy icon, so he's weak to frenzy. If you apply lots of frenzy, he'll trigger a status effect that'll also do damage itself. But as time goes on, it gets harder and harder to apply frenzy on Libra the more and more you apply it. Frenzy also does fire damage, so you get a 20% bonus if using fire on Libra, but you also get a plus 35% increase in damage if you use Holy against Libra. So sometimes as Revenant, I'd rather have Discus of Light instead of Flame of Frenzy, which a lot of the Flame of Frenzy attacks have a really long cast time, which makes it harder to DPS Libra. You don't really have to follow this chart to a T, but if you do, you can really increase your team's damage by having specific elements. But you can also do a lot of damage against bosses that do resist your elements. For example, Shattering Crystal. So a lot of people bring Shattering Crystal into the Gnoster fight. Gnoster resists 50% magic attack, but that's the Moth that resists it. The Scorpion's only 10%. So you can still do a ton of damage with your Shattering Crystal build on the Scorpion. And then there's also another factor, which is not in this chart, which is Animus. So Animus in Everdark Gnoster doesn't seem to have any resistances at all, but you can't proc any of the status ailments on Animus itself, but you can proc bleed while Animus is possessing Gnoster. So it's a little bit strange there. So sometimes you'll see a lot of mages bring Shattering Crystal so they can burst down Animus, the model of the red spirit thing itself. And melees can do a ton of damage. You can use any spell that hits often and deplete Animus's HP really easily. So you don't have to follow these weaknesses to a T. Another example would be Caligo. Caligo's 20% resistant to magic. You can still use Shattering Crystal against Caligo. You can still use Shattering Crystal to break her armor, but you still might want to use fire because fire breaks her armor faster. And the more fire you apply to Caligo, the easier the fight is because Caligo takes poise damage if you apply enough fire, and it helps break Caligo's stance. So you don't have to follow these exactly, but even at depth 5, people will choose very strange builds against the Night Lord, even when I offer them the weakness of the weapon. Obviously, you can play with any weapons you want, and sometimes certain weapons might be better for the boss, even if the boss is not weak to it. But just keep that in mind as you fight the bosses, or think about how useful your damage is against them. All right. So, Everdark Gnoster. My heart would used to sink every time Everdark Gnoster appeared in Deep of Night, but now it's not that big of a deal to me. Why? Because there's one mechanic that makes this fight a lot more trivial and makes the fight go a lot faster. It would be this mechanic where Animus floats on the ground after she casts her orbital laser attack. There is a damage window where you can just hit Animus itself and do massive damage. Starting from this point, you can start hitting Animus if you have something like Duchess Adult, and you applied it before she casts this attack. But if not, it's fine. It's still a 15-second window. When she casts her orbital light attack, you can just regular sprints to dodge all of them, even the main beam. And as you notice, I turn around, Animus is just standing there. She stands there for like 15 seconds. If you time and aim your strafe correctly with the orbital laser, you can cut off the distance you are from Animus and keep doing damage to her right now. This is like an old video, but it's just showing someone got caught with aggro with Scorpion, but that's fine. And then my teammate trying to rescue them instead of attacking Animus itself. Because I strafed so far away and didn't target it correctly, I barely have any time to do damage, but 340 here, 1002 casts. I don't have that many damage up, but imagine if you had 2 or 3 people hitting it. You can really deplete Animus this way, and it's the biggest damage window you get. Even melee characters can do a lot of damage during this phase. And if you remember, Animus doesn't have many resistances, or any at all actually, but you can't really proc status effects while it's on its own. But literally just knowing this one mechanic will make your fights go way easier, and if you all 3 know this mechanic, it's a really easy fight. It's not perfect because sometimes you'll have aggro from Fortis or Gnoster, so you have to keep that in mind. If someone can take aggro from both of them, that's great. If you only get 2 players doing damage, if you're a Recluse with a Shattering Crystal, you can solo like half of Animus's health or more. And there's a couple of strategies for this fight in general. One is heavy DPSing Animus, Fortis, and Gnoster. If you heavy DPS everyone, you'll only have to deal with enhanced Animus Gnoster, and you won't have to deal with aggro from like a regular Fortis, or vice versa. So most people will just DPS everything, but if you DPS everything, you have to know how to dodge every attack. Um, and Enhanced Gnoster can wipe your team if they're not familiar with how to dodge Enhanced Gnoster's Falling Rain attack, for example. As you get more experience with this fight, and you play with like more experienced players, this is probably the default way to go. There is a way to kind of cheese this fight, and that would be to have someone lure a Gnoster and just never kill Gnoster. By doing that, you don't have to dodge Gnoster's enhanced homing missiles, which is really easy to dodge, but a lot of people don't know how to dodge still, even at depth 5. And I used this strategy right when Gnoster was released, but I don't think many of my games actually go with this strategy, so I'm just going to recommend the first strategy for now. But if you have a trio or someone on your team wants to do this, you can just never kill Gnoster and just deal with Fartus, and Animus will spam its orbital laser attack more, and you can DPS Animus more. Other must-know mechanics, like I mentioned earlier, you have to use regular sprint to dodge the orbital laser attack from Animus. Sometimes you have to maintain aggro from Fartus or Gnoster at the same time, so just take some practice to get used to all that. The final beam still can be dodged without surge sprint, because the visual hitbox is a bit bigger than the hurt box, and it takes a bit to expand, but if you can, conserve stamina and just surge sprint away the last beam. A really important mechanic is knowing how to dodge Gnoster's Falling Rain attack. It's also solved by regular sprinting, but you have to regular sprint to the side or to the back. And just click that. Here's the casting animation. The Iron Eye is trying to cancel the attack, but I think the Iron Eye missed the timing, which is fine. As soon as you start seeing the rain, you can just regular sprint to the left or backwards. Duchess should spam dodge. The Duchess didn't know how to dodge the attack. Is at 5. Alright. But just another example of another potential run ender. For Fartus, my tips would just be stay by his tail. He can't really hit you from there, but he does move around a lot. And if you want to dodge the exploding red vines from him, you have to wait for the explosion to get to you and then dodge the explosion, not necessarily the visual indicator of the vine. And this extra clip here is just more proof that relics really... You don't really need to have the Everdark Night Invader relics to burst down bosses, especially when you're really experienced. In this video, this Wilder has 1,200 hours in the game. I only have like 500 to 600 at this point. We only did 2 Everdarks, and we only had 1 Night Invader camp, which is really rare, in depth 5. But we are literally hunting down Gnoster to the point that we stance broke Animus and Gnoster. I've never seen that until this run, but there you go. And notice that Animus also has damage negation when it's possessing Gnoster, so we're just attacking through that. And triggering the bleed on Gnoster triggered the bleed on Animus, which you can't do when Animus is by itself. For regular Gnoster, I mean, anyone can lure away Gnoster for phase 1. If you're the Guardian and your Iron Eye is not doing it for some reason, you go do it. It doesn't matter. Phase 1 is not that long. Just be ready to take the reins and just lure Gnoster, because Gnoster is pretty easy to dodge anyway. Once they combine, there's a way to dodge the regular attack by just sprinting to the side and then just dodging 2 to 3 times when you see the missiles come from Gnoster. Nothing too crazy. Next is Libra. So the difficulty with Libra are the Condemned. And then all of the mini attacks from Libra, like his sigils. It feels, for a lot of people, it feels like impossible. However, the one counter that people still aren't aware of or just haven't learned yet because they're not camping Reddit every day looking for the newest tip or watching a bunch of videos is less likely to be targeted. Specifically, having less likely to be targeted level 9. This impossible boss actually is pretty solo carryable if you have that one passive at least on one person. The main reason why it is solo carryable is because Libra has a smaller moveset than his normal version. It's just the condemned that are a big problem. 9 is the breakpoint for when the condemned will eventually give up on chasing you, and you can just hit Libra itself and just finish the game. If you get a +6, it might be worth keeping, but it doesn't really work on its own. You might want to you have to combine 2 +6s so you can break that +9 breakpoint. If you have it, the main goal is to help your teammates with the condemned, and then once Libra starts spawning an overwhelming amount of them, just hit Libra instead. Because it gets really difficult to control the condemned unless you have maybe the optimal meta comp like Iron Eye, Duchess, even Recluse would work. But you have to do everything in your power if you want a... I'm not sure if a free win is the right word, but a consistent or easy win is to get this passive. And how do you get this passive? Opening everything, doing a lot of POIs, killing red mobs. All those drop opportunities are worth it. You can increase your chance of getting this from a shop. I mean, excuse me, you're not going to increase your chance from getting this from a shop, but you could get it from a shop. You have to use everything or do everything that you can during the day to get that passive. If you don't get this passive for at least one person, like a DPS, you can still win. However, it's going to be conditional, and it's difficult, especially with random. So if you have certain AoE spells like Moog Spear, you can trigger the skill, and you can just trigger Bleed on 3 condemned at once, get rid of them. If you have defeating enemies fills more of the art gauge, a +0, +1. When the condemned died, it'll recharge your ults. So you can imagine it's really broken for certain characters. And even if you are killing the condemned, you still have to attack Libra a lot, and sometimes it still gets under control. It's winnable without it, especially if you're a coordinated trio. But I'm just gonna say that you probably want to hunt for less likely to be targeted to make that fight that much easier. And when I say solo carryable, it's very solo carryable if you take your time. So this is like an 11-minute video of me solo carrying some random people. I think the other Revenant actually commented on one of my posts, and he was really cool. But in this video, you'll notice somewhere around... dead. For a lot of people, the fight seems like it's over right here. My teammates opted to go glass cannon, which is fine if they don't die, but unfortunately they just got caught a bunch of times. They didn't want to buy the damage negation from the shop, but that's whatever. I actually really wanted to prove that I could solo carry this, so I didn't mind anyway. At this point, it looks not solo carryable, but the fight is 10 minutes long for a reason. We all have less likely to be targeted, but I have enough damage negation to tank certain hits, so I'm pretty confident I can solo carry. And even though my Discus of Light only does about 300 damage per tick, if I cast it a few times, it's still chipping away at his HP bar. So I know I can still carry. But in order to carry, you have to take it really slow, because Libra doesn't really have that many attacks. But you don't want to get caught by one of the sigil attacks, especially when casting. So all I have to do as Revenant, just wait for the Condemned to die, just take him away with my Discus of Lights, and I can bring my teammates back up. They can do some DPS for a bit before they get down again. And once I trigger the riot phase after stripping down his HP enough, the Condemned will start hitting each other, and we're just fighting Libra on the other side of the map and doing a bunch of damage. Recluse is only doing 500 damage with Night Comet. Doesn't matter. We're all three hitting Libra. Libra does not have that much HP. We hit him enough to the point where he gets angry. If you trigger this and you have less likely to be targeted, Libra will get angry and attack his Condemned. When Libra attacks the Condemned, the Condemned will fight him as well. So the Revenant clone of me with a Lightning Spear actually did about 600 damage to Libra itself with a fully charged Lightning Spear. So that'll help deplete his HP as well. So it's just so much easier once you get to that riot phase. And the Condemned are literally just running away because we have less likely to be targeted on everyone. Also, I think I covered my relics here. They weren't that great. Let's see. 2 Night Invaders, the max HP. I think I have plenty of useless lines on here as well. So I get plus 10% damage from improved incantations, minus 5 from this relic. I literally didn't get any use out of the max HP from the Great Church because we didn't clear any. I don't have, well, I do have 3 Sacred Seals equipped, but nothing exciting here. Plus 10% damage from incantations up, and plus 14 from Night Invade. Nothing too crazy there. For normal Libra, I still have a section for normal Libra because people at depth 5 also 3-bar a lot in the normal Libra fight, even though he's considered to be kind of easy. But in Deep of Night, he's a little bit more difficult in punishing because of the madness triggers, and you just can't really tank anything in Deep 5, so I've included like just a tiny aura farming clip. My Recluse is 3-barred here on a normal Libra fight. The reason for that is this team comp isn't going to break Libra's meditation. The only person who can is Iron Eye after like 2 phases. If you're really coordinated, you could break all the sigils with like a bow, with like 3 people on a bow, but usually what will happen is Libra will enhance himself from his meditation, and he'll be more aggressive and shoot out a bunch of sigils that'll kill your teammates. This is more aura farming. Same principles here. Don't have camera lock on. Watch Libra. I'm still watching Libra. Aggro's on my Iron Eye. Libra starts turning towards me. I'm still confident in reviving my teammate. 1, because I'm watching Libra. 2, because I have a successive bubble and some damage negation. So even if I get hit, I'm not going to die in 1 hit. I'm not using my ult here because I'm confident I can take him from 3 bars with Helen. So no problem. Recluse pings to try and help me out and alert me, but I don't need that help because I already apply the same principle, and this is just like routine for me. I see Libra pop sigil. I know I can just dodge the sigil while reviving my teammates, so I'll just wait a bit, dodge. I can deplete more of the bars before the next sigil or next attack. It's coming again. That's fine. I saw it. I'm just dodging again, and he's revived. Like, those are common revives that if you get really good at, you can save entire run. Okay, Everdark Maris. So, Everdark Maris feels almost impossible to solo carry, and in my opinion is probably the hardest boss you can face at depth 5, especially with random trios. If feels impossible to solo carry, but it is possible. And because it's so difficult, the video will be about someone else solo carrying me. On my way to learn how to solo carry, someone solo carried me, fortunately. I guess the number one tip would use Storm Ruler against Maris. It's the skill from the weapon you get from killing phase 1. And there are multiple ways to buff Storm Ruler's damage, like Everjails, Invaders, skill attack up, attack power up at full HP. It also does split damage, so physical attack buffs help, magic attack power up helps. I guess one of the biggest run enders is not knowing how to deal with the exploding water bomb. So on clip 9, timestamp 546, I'll show you how to deal with them. Okay. When these exploding water bombs start shooting at you, you can avoid getting hit entirely by just standing still and using light attacks from Storm Ruler. With this light attack, it's going to cut all these projectiles in range, but not only is it going to cut the projectiles that it comes into contact with, it's also going to get rid of the bubbles that are right next to your character. You see that bubble that was just landed on the ground there? As I cast this, it gets rid of that. I think in another frame, I get hit with it. I don't actually get hit with it, but it gets really close to my character. Right here. This bubble looks like it's about to hit me. It's about to land, but it somehow gets cleared by the R1 from the light attack. So most people will spam light attack at this phase, but you have to keep an eye on your stamina and your FP. Especially if you're a melee character, you're not going to have infinite FP and you need to recharge it. So I would say to probably pace yourself and just try and time your slashes to get rid of the bubbles. Save some stamina in case you get overwhelmed with bubbles on the ground. And then you can just wipe all those away because you have enough FP and stam to get rid of them. But it's really that trivial of a fight if you can deal with those. If you knew this one mechanic. And in this video, all 3 of us did know, but some of us struggled a bit because they weren't aware of the clearing of the bubbles on the ground. This Wilder definitely knew. And that's how he solo carried. But I'll go into that later. For his ground exploding laser beam, this one's actually really difficult to learn because the sound cue and the visual cues are really not that helpful. But you can learn it. It's just really difficult to get the timing of. So I'll go here. So he does that exploded laser beam. You actually don't get damage at this point. It looks really spooky. You still don't get damage at this point. This is where the damage comes in. So you're wondering, how the heck do I dodge this attack? There is a tiny sound cue that leads up to the explosion, but there's still a delay after the sound cue that you have to wait for the explosion for. So it is pretty difficult to learn the timing, but you can learn it, and you can use sound cues to help you with it. Another tip I have is avoid reviving your teammates when Mars is sending out Tsunami Wave. I think that's probably the biggest reason, or the main reason that I lose a run, is because either someone else revived me while I was in a wave, or I revived someone else while they were in a wave. And if you're stuck in a wave, you're just gonna die. So normally, I would follow my own advice here and just run away and deal with Maris's Dark Balls. However, as a Revenant, I have a pretty good revive toolkit. My Storm Ruler Claws. I have Sebastian, who can do 2 bars on his own if he shouts. And I can pick up the Wilder before the Tsunami gets here. The Wilder has a hook, he can get away. I know all that, but I still hesitate and panic because I'm still trying to learn how to solo carry this fight, even though I'm being solo carried here. I panicked for a second, and that almost cost me the run. If I just stayed, I could have gotten the Wilder way earlier, and the Wilder would have left with no issue. But for some stroke of luck, I was able to get the Wilder right before the wave. The Wilder uses the iframe that you get from getting revived, his hook, and he gets through the wave just in time. And he aura farms me. So if you're in a situation where both of your teammates are downed with 3 bars, you're the last one left, and Maris has the dark balls on them, the way you solo carry this fight is you don't go for your 3-bar teammates, you target all the dark balls, and kill them as fast as possible. And this Walder was so good that he was targeting the other ball after he targeted another one before the projectile even reached that one. And by doing that, he was able to clear 2 of them really quickly. And here you can see Wilder's literally 1v1ing Maris, and these bubbles are not a problem because he knows he can clear all the bubbles that are near him that land near him. And he just gets out unharmed. And then he just breaks Maris's dark balls. I dropped him my claws earlier in the game. He used Revenant's claws for a quick revive, and we win. That's how you solo carry Maris. I couldn't pull it off myself, so thanks Pulse for doing that. So yeah, it's really tough, especially when you're playing with randoms. They might not know of all of these little things that can optimize your run and really make it much easier. But don't lose hope, because people will get better and better at the game, and the knowledge will spread. For normal Maris, nothing too crazy here. Just use lightning to break Maris when it's doing a sleep skill. And I guess one of the key tips is the suicide jellyfish bombs that Maris sends at you. You can just kill them. They don't have that much HP, and they do damage to Maris. If you kill the raindrop or water teardrop, that also does damage to Maris. I'm gonna bring this up at every point at every boss, but players still struggle a lot with Everdark Gladius at depth 5. Even though there are 3 clones, what makes it difficult is the aggro switching between all the 3 clones and having 3 players. In solos, it's difficult because you're 1v3ing, but in trios, it's difficult because you could get killed by crossfire, you could get killed by flames from another attack when you don't have aggro, you could get killed from aggro switching when your teammate dies, something like the torpedo in the phase transition. So that's why it's the first bullet point here, is because it's not really that easy to learn how to deal with the torpedo clones, and then it's not that easy to learn how to deal with them in trios. I didn't learn this. This is probably one of my last mechanics that I learned to deal with in trios. So we'll go over to the phase transition. The reason why it's kind of out of order is because I covered the most important ones, in my opinion, that causes wipes and are harder to learn. So here's the phase transition attack when I have aggro. $528. As soon as Gladius moves like that, we're gonna start splitting up. Dodge this attack. The best way to dodge it is to regular sprint for the first 2 charges, and then surge sprint for the last charge. I don't know why, but I was probably panicking here, panic rolling, but I did surge sprint the last charge, which was enough to get past this attack. You can try and dodge it with a dodge rule, but it's pretty difficult. I'd recommend just regular sprint and then surge sprint. And then here's a torpedo attack when you split up as trios and the aggro's on Wilder instead. He dodges it, does Wilder things. But it's not that bad if you split up. If I'm in the middle here, I'll get caught by the crossfire. If the Wilder died for some reason, I was prepared to dodge it by just surge sprinting away the last one. No problem. Okay, next I'll go into Gladius's map AoE attack. The tricky thing about this attack is you have to adjust when you dodge based on how far away you are from Gladius. The reason for that is you're dodging the ground AoE itself, you're not dodging the initial slam. And the ground AoE takes a bit to travel to you. That explosion takes a very non-negligible amount of time to travel to you, but it's a really tight window to try and adjust for. So let me go here. Ground AoE dodge 124. Right here, as he slams, no damage is being dealt to you right now, especially if you're at this distance. I mean, if you're up close, you might get hit by other stuff, but usually you're at this distance. This is not going to damage you, but the explosion that's coming from Gladius that takes some travel time, that is what I'm dodging here. I'm not dodging this rock, I'm dodging the explosion. And the explosion's right here. I dodged right before the explosion. I always keep around the same distance, so the timing is about the same. You can kind of use the sound cue to dodge that. Also, don't use a flame spell because you get minus 50% damage using flame spells against Gladius. But as RNG goes, I only got a Radagon's Ring of Light, and I had to upgrade that seal, and I didn't really want to risk using the hammer. Even with that fire resist, I'm still doing an okay 400 damage, but not that great. There's a couple other attacks I cover here, but they're not really timestamps in the video. They're pretty trivial to dodge, or at least they're easier to learn from movesets. Another kind of hidden mechanic is his aura farm mechanic. So at 330, actually at 344, he'll do his double swing into an aura farm. Go a little bit earlier. Oh, that's his triple wave attack. You're dodging the waves here, you're not dodging the swing unless you're up close. Okay, when he does this attack or animation, he'll do a double swing, and there's a pretty good chance he's gonna try an aura farm. When he's aura farming, if you hit him up to 3 times, he can buff his attack power up to 3 times. Because of the scaling at depth 5 and a lot of players getting one-shot because we don't have enough vigor or damage negation, and the attack does naturally high damage with the scaling, some people choose to hit him while he's aura farming, but most of the time I prefer not to hit him. It's a really small window, and if you do hit him while he's aura farming, you can buff his attack to break through your teammate's damage negation. However, if you're all glass cannon, if you couldn't find any damage negation, it might be worth it. But if you do attack him, he will carry that buff over for a bit. So for me, I prefer not to damage him, but some people will use this as damage window. And as you can see here, Revenant hits Gladius, and Gladius gets buffed. And the reason why people will choose a DPS Gladius at this phase is because you should have a pretty good idea of how to dodge the fire wave attack at this point. And he still retains the buff for a bit, but he's deciding to do another AoE attack, so he doesn't really get use out of it. But right here, if you had enough damage negation, you can survive both the fire flames that come from the slash and the slash damage itself. So it looks like Wilder might have got hit here. I don't know if the buff carries over to the flames, but I'll just assume it does. And he still has the buff. Still has the buff for a bit. And there it's gone. And I don't know if the Wilder died because of that buff, because he touched all of the tiny ground AoEs. Not sure what happened there. But as you can see, even though the Revenant hit the even though Revenant hit Gladius and Gladius does a ton of damage, there's other sources of damage that could really knock your teammates down. So I would just be careful if you want to DPS him during that phase. I'd recommend not DPSing him while he's aura farming, but if you're a trios, you can decide based on what you guys have. Like I mentioned several times, a lot of his attacks have residual flames, which are kind of hard to see, but you need to consider dodging them, or you can tank some of the flames without damage negation. Here's another video of me clutching with triple rings of light. Arnai had no clue at depth 5 how to dodge most of the attacks, whatever. The Duchess actually contributed a lot to this fight and was pretty familiar with it. If you really want to watch this for whatever reason, you can, but just more aura farming that you can do once you're experienced with the lost mechanic. I also have a lot of vigor and some damage negation here, so it wasn't too bad. And triple rings of light as Revenant is really fun against Gladius. For normal Gladius, don't really have tips here. If you're really struggling, you can watch boss analysis video. His clones are super weak to holy and get staggered. No shame if you're not good at normal Gladius, because at the beginning of the game, like I mentioned before, it took me 12 hours to solo queue with trios to clear the boss. Fun times. Earlier in the boss mechanic section, I mentioned that there is one potential exception to where team composition kind of does matter. But I'm going to go against the grain a little bit, and from my experience playing Everdark Caligo games, the best way to actually just clear this fight is apply a lot of fire. But there is a reason why being a Walder or Iron Eye in particular does counter this fight with the Frost ultimate, because these two characters are great at canceling the Frost ultimate from Caligo. And the Frost ultimate is kind of an unfair mechanic because there's no real way to dodge it except if you have an iframe from your ults, but you're not always going to have the iframe from your ult because it takes a bit to charge. Other characters can cancel Caligo's ultimate Frost, but it's a little bit more difficult with certain characters. You can make it work. Walder and Iron Eye are the easiest. Walder has fire in his ults, and it does make the fight more manageable. But the intention of my guides is to help people consistently win, and I don't think you need to be able to cancel the ults to consistently win. Especially if you're playing with newer players, or you are a newer player in depth 1 to 4, your Wilder or I might not have a clue on how to cancel it. They might not be good at canceling it. But in my experience in depth 5, not canceling it isn't that big of a deal because we usually have a lot of fire skills. But fire skills require some RNG, but there are a lot of weapons that can counter Caligo. Not only do fire skills do more damage against Caligo, that 35% earlier, they break Caligo's armor faster, and they can trigger a special poise break on Caligo, which is separate from Caligo's stance break. So if you're just applying a ton of fire, her armor's going to break faster, the armor breaks do a ton of damage, and she doesn't feel that tanky anymore if you start breaking her with fire and spamming fire skills. So that would be my major tip. Instead of relying on canceling the Frost ultimate, I would just try my best to have fire skills, and I've not had any problems clearing Caligo at depth 5 with fire skills only. More of a min-max tip, but there is a major punish or a DPS window when Caligo starts transitioning and builds her armor. So when she falls down, you can actually DPS her right here and be perfectly fine. There's no damage ticks, but there is a 1 damage tick when she falls down and shouts. And if you watch closely here, you'll see it. Right when she falls down, she doesn't actually cast the attack yet, so you have to wait a little bit. And right there, you have to dodge. I'm doing with my friend here, who I'm teaching and helping climb to 9999. She's really good at dodging it. I'm terrible at dodging it. Revenant has a worse iframe than Recluse. I get hit. I don't recommend trying this at home if you don't have enough damage negation, because in this video I have 80% damage negation and 1000 vigor, and that attack did 800 damage to me after all that. So don't try this at home if you don't have enough damage negation. Usually what I do is run away in case my teammates miss the dot. But if you get really good at it, you can really punish Caligo during that window. And more of an unethical tip, if you apply a lot of fire during this transition, there's a chance that Caligo bugs out and just breaks her armor on her own and takes a ton of damage and keeps breaking her armor until she dies. I don't know if it's fire during this transition that causes that bug, or if there's something else, or if it just happens on its own, but that's a common theme, I guess, for that bug. Hopefully they fix it. Just as a general tip for dragon fights in general, just stay under her legs. There are situations where you don't want to be under her legs, like maybe if you only have Shattering Crystal as a caster and you want to break pieces of her armor, you might be at her side. But the legs are the best place to stand. You only have to dodge like one attack, where she does her stomach breath. I included a depth 3 clip here because I think it showcases a lot of those reviving skills. And I guess you can get a feel for depth 3 scaling as well, add some variety, so it's not just a depth 5 video. This was a long time ago, but as you see, my teammates are dead. It looks over. I have no class. I have like 60 HP. She's doing with breath attack, which is really hard to dodge. But I'm aware of pretty much every mechanic at this point of Caligo. I know that if I stand touching the ice breath and then I dodge into it, I won't die to the ice breath. I dodge it. 1 HP, she attacks, dodge that again. I'm spamming dodge, I'm panicking. I have heal as Revenants on my incants. I'm good. There's a stomach breath where you can't just stay under her legs, you just run away. Nothing. The only attack you really have to dodge. Okay, so at this point, I know Caligo's going up to do her Ice Shard Dive Bomb attack. I think this is a really good example of where character mastery can really help you out. Because I know Caligo is doing the ice attack, it gives me a damage window to revive my Wilder. Or revive damage window. I know Sebastian, with his shouts, he's able to pick up 2 bars on his own with just that shout. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to spawn Sebastian and hope he does that. When I spawn Sebastian, I'm going to slightly adjust my positioning so that Caligo's ice spikes don't, or hopefully they don't hit Sebastian. I don't know if they're going to hit Sebastian, but I'm going to try. I'm going to position myself so they don't hit Sebastian. And as you can see, Sebastian's slamming into the Wilder, and he's reviving the Wilder. This dodge I know how to do for the ice dive. I can't go too far away, or Sebastian will despawn and stop the revive, and all that will have been for nothing. But if you're a Revenant, you know that the spawns despawn at some point if you're too far away. I take frostbite damage here, but I'm Revenant. I kept my heal seal, or 1 heal seal. I can deal with that. And Sebastian finally does the shout, picks up the Wilder. Sorry. Another mechanic I know is that there are certain safe spots for when Caligo shoots the ice shards at you. The very middle here will usually never have an ice shard, so I literally just standing here and I don't have to dodge at all. Bastion's still reviving for some reason. I know how to dodge this as well. Same thing. Wait for the ice breath to reach me. Dodge into it. Wilder gets hit. Whatever. Step 3. I'm not going to expect much. There's another explosion after that tail swipe, but because I got knocked down already, I didn't get hit by it. And we win. And another case for fire being good is right here. We don't have that many damage ups. I only have an Evergale, but Wilder is breaking the stance. We're doing a ton of fire damage, and her HP is just melting because I have a Dragon Breath as well. That's 10k damage there. We don't have anything that's special. I think I have a frame of my relics and items. Nothing special here. 3 Evergales. Maybe an Incants plus. Okay, for normal Caligo, same thing, just stay under her legs, except for that one attack with the Ice Breath. There's some more min-max stuff you can do, not that important. And I alluded to the dodging the breath attacks. Dodge as soon as you touch the visual of the ice air. Takes a bit to get used to, kind of hard to deal with, but once you get the hang of it, it's not too bad. Alright, Heolstor. So Heolstor feels like one of those bosses where it can become extremely easy with experienced players. I know that sounds kind of weird, but the reason why it's sometimes considered a free win for a lot of players, especially experienced one, is because in the base game there was nothing to do before Everdarks. So what we were doing then was just soloing Heolstor and learning his moveset. I had nothing to do. I did a Colossal Sword solo. I did a Revenant parry solo. I know pretty much everything about the fight. But for some people, Heolstor is really difficult because they're a caster. They didn't do a solo, which is fine. Not everyone wants to do solo runbacks. Not everyone wants to play this game solo. It's built for trios. And like I mentioned earlier, casters aren't familiar with aggro or dodging some attacks. And you don't have to learn this fight solo. You can learn fights by just watching boss moveset analysis videos or just playing trio. What makes Heolstor a bit difficult is 2 things. One, his infinity damage, so all of his enhanced attacks on phase 2, and 2, his aggro switching. If you were watching earlier, he did an aggro switch on the Iron Eye, just 2 arrows, switches over, and kills Iron Eye. For my tips for Heolstor, besides soloing, is watching a moveset analysis, because Heolstor has some really weird dodge timings, and he has some darkness goo from one of his attacks that looks really strange to dodge, and has a really delayed attack on it. So yeah, my best tip is just to watch a moveset analysis video. Specifically for his map AoE, which can one-shot you, is similar to the Gladius attack with his map AoE. Oh, and by the way, this is a Colossal Parry solo, not a depth 5 or depth 3 video, but it's just another example of how much time we had to waste before Everdarks came out, and how easy the base game can be. It took me 10 runs to get here, but I'm literally just taking so many hits, and the fight's lasting 10 minutes because I'm trying to parry. And I'm really bad at it in this video. So another, I guess, shill for soloing bosses, if you can. For his ground AoE, you have several options. Some people choose to stand right under him, and you can actually hit Heolstor while he's doing this attack, which is pretty good for aura farming. But you do have to dodge his initial slam differently than if you were at this distance where I am. There's also a safe spot around this angle where his explosion won't reach, kind of like Gladius's attack as well. But I would just be prepared to dodge it at any place, at any distance, because sometimes you might be out of position or you can't reach the specific angle. So if you're up close, you want to dodge like right there, so you dodge the initial attack. But if you're far away, the initial attack won't hurt you at all because you have to dodge the ground AoE that comes after. So you have to dodge this ground AoE that comes right after that explosion again, right like the Gladius attack. I'm not sure if I would have dodged it if I was standing right here in this video. I think the timing might be slightly off, but I'm just dodging just to practice here. But yeah, adjust your timing based on how far you are from Heolstor. As for Fulghor, a lot of people think the Everdark Fulghor fight is a free win in Deep of Night, but I really wouldn't call it a free win. That's due to several reasons. One, if you're a range character, you're not used to dodging him at close range, it's going to be harder for you to revive your teammates. And second, the aggro switching. For some reason, less likely to be targeted doesn't seem to work that well on Fulghor. The amount of times that the Iron Eye shoots 2 arrows and Fulghor does a 180 snipe, or the Recluse hits Fulghor with Stars of Ruin and Fulghor does the 180 snipe and knocks him down is pretty common. Yeah, it's just for some reason, I don't know why that is, but just be prepared for it. If you're prepared to get snipe because you're hitting Fulghor often, you can dodge his aggro switches on reaction. And number 3, it's gonna sound weird, but laziness. It's Everdark Fulghor has a really consistent moveset, and if you know the fight, you can dodge his moves pretty well. There's not too many gotchas with Fulghor. He's one of the favorites for a reason. He's one of the easiest for a reason. But for some reason in Deep of Night, everyone gets way lazier, and that includes me. You can do a ton of DPS to him, you're so confident, and then the run can end. I want to prove this laziness point because Fulghor was the one that ended my 19 win streak. I was about to beat my 20 win streak, but I have a 19 win streak and I failed to clutch here. The Recluse struggled to survive basic attacks, while they dodged basic attacks. This is depth 5. It's fairly recent too. I don't know why, but whatever. The reason why we lost, or the reason why my streak was broken, was because I failed. And we're just gonna watch that fail, because this is not a guide of me just aura farming. I'm gonna show you me panicking and failing even after having these many hours in the game. I have enough damage negation that I can tank the arrow attack. I can pick up the Balder just fine. I try to dodge here, but I missed the dodge because I'm panicking. At this point, I'm still a bit confident, a little bit worried. I'm even more worried now because my Balder didn't know how to dodge that attack. Maybe he did, I don't know, whatever. I know how to dodge the rest of that attack. I've soloed Fulghor with a Colossal Sword. This is no issue for me. His 3-hit attacks, super easy to dodge for me. Just 1, 2, waits, dodge again. I'm stabbing him so I can build my ults. My ults are 80%. I get my ults, we win. Just a regular dodge from here. 3-hit attack again. Just spamming dodge twice after the first swing. Just waiting and then dodging the third. Hit him again to build my ults. Arrow rain, super trivial. All you have to do is turn around once it gets close to you, do like a clockwise or counterclockwise motion, and it can't track you anymore. But that would be great if I did that. So I start panicking here. I don't want to lose my win streak. I have a ton of endurance for whatever reason that I normally do. I think I can just outrun this. But because I'm panicking, I try to outrun it. I'm trying to dodge and run away from Fulghor's arrow attack as well. So I don't turn around and I don't clockwise shrug off these arrows, and the run is over. I didn't need to keep running. I didn't need to even dodge Fulghor's arrow because I had enough damage negation. And I just died. Even with this many hours. Oh, by the way, I don't have a dragon incult because RNG, but at least I had the spear. And there goes a 19 win streak at Def 5. So this boss, which everyone thinks is easy, I still would say lock in. I think I covered this already earlier, but the 10 hit combo is actually pretty easy to dodge if you just wait for the initial swing, dodge that, dodge one more time, and surge sprint away. And for normal Fulghor, he can actually be tough in his own way. Fulghor's goo arm attacks, the goo can actually damage you, and if you're a caster at medium range, it's definitely going to damage you. You can kind of jump over the goo as a caster at medium range, but what I see casters doing the most is running very far away. But if you want to dodge his goo swings, you have to be out of casting range. So you might lose DPS because you're not hitting Fulghor as often and such like that. Best way to dodge the goo is just to dodge close range Fulghor and you won't ever get hit by the goo. And then Fulghor will continually do his charge attack, which you can cancel from lightning. However, if he's already debuffed from lightning, you might need to still melee him to cancel that attack. There are some games where I would cast a lightning spear, someone else casts a lightning spear, and it still doesn't break his poise because of some debuff existing on him already. So even if you're breaking the stance, just mentally prepare yourself for the stance not to be broken and that spear to shoot out from under you if he doesn't get canceled. Okay, last but not least, Adel. So Adel is probably another boss that gets rated as the easiest. So Fulghor and Adel are probably the most easiest bosses you can face. However, Deep of Night scaling always changes things. Adel definitely looks more scary than he actually is. But this is where actually hitting the boss is super important and happens way less often in Deep of Night, happens way less often in Adel if you're not comfortable with the fight. Yes, his moveset is pretty consistent and simple, but everything's scarier when you can either get one shot or almost one shot. So your melees will not be hitting Adel as often if they're not that confident, and then your DPS will plummet. The reason why that Dagger Duchess is not doing a bunch of damage and you hate them is because they're not confidently weaving in attacks with their build, even though they can do 300, 500 damage per swing. Another reason is if you didn't share successive attack bubbles for your Wilder or your melees, they're going to play way more carefully when fighting Adel to do damage to them. So a lot of different things come into play with Adel, even at Thief of Night, even with Adel being one of the easier bosses. And I'm just ranting here, but I've had cosmetic melees, I've had cosmetic casters, because they were on full-on survival mode and just not comfortable with the fight. For the ground explosion, you can jump to dodge most of the explosions. You still have to time your jump a little bit, but it's a little bit easier than to dodge. And here is this video where we had frequent disconnects. I disconnected twice from this game. I think I disconnected here when the circle was closing. Steel Lover, I love Seals too, but Steel Lover never came back. And we have a dual Great Sword Duchess with 2 blue Great Swords. And I have a Black Flame spell as Revenant. It's also blue because we couldn't get to the mines because I disconnected. And we still won in 10 minutes. and I still don't have damage negation. I have lightning damage negation. I have less likely to be targeted. He has some damage negation. He's goaded. R farming on drawing aggro as Duchess. And we still win even as a duo, even with disconnects, even with blue weapons, even with a non-optimal spell. It looks really spooky, but if you get familiar with the fight, you can really lock in and power your way through still. As for normal Adel, I feel like normal Adel is kind of a free win, but no shame if you struggle with Adel because does look scary, and you can always watch a moveset analysis video. There is one particular grab which is kind of hard to dodge. It's like this really weird delayed chomp, but if you can master that, you can grind out certain games where you don't have much. All right. I added a small section specifically for some night bosses, and I'm only picking out certain details for some of these night bosses, which can wipe your team. This guy will be way too long if I covered every boss, and you can learn all the other bosses on your own. If you really want, you can find boss moveset analysis videos, especially if you didn't play the base Elden Ring or the other Dark Souls games. Knight's Cavalry, just try not to get killed off screen from the swings. After you knock off a rider, you want to continually backstab that rider. The reason why you want to continually backstab them is you want to prevent the knight from spawning in another horse, which will draw on the fight for way longer, burn your heals, etc. You could wipe this way. I think I've wiped once to Knight's Cavalry when we weren't being careful, and we didn't have flasks because we were fighting in the rain. But if you continually backstab the down knights, you can just, you have an iframe, you won't get hit by the other knights. Your teammates can attack it while it's stunned, and you're stabbing them. Makes it much easier of a fight. If you don't backstab it, you can spawn in another horse, and you're back to square one. The second boss I want to mention is Smelter Demon. So he actually has a really basic moveset, but he can charge himself up to all the way to like a blue flame phase. Once he gets to the blue flame phase, everyone's going to take burn damage as well as Smelter Demon. Again, if you don't have flasks because you spent time in the rain and burned all of them, this could end your run. It hasn't happened to me yet, but I'm just going to assume that it can happen because I've gotten close. Smelter Demon can also kill itself at this phase, but the way you stop it is by stance breaking it. So sometimes as a Revenant, I have the Strength Relic, I'll help break the stance. For Battlefield Commander, the Scarlet Rot version. So if there's one move that can wipe a whole team, and I think there's like a popular post on Reddit somewhere, and that's the Scarlet Rot Whirlwind. It's a multi-hit attack, and one of the reasons why I'm explicitly mentioning these bosses for Night 1 is because you might not have good items on Night 1, your melee might not have damage negation, you might not have good spells, so some of these bosses can get even harder to deal with. I don't know if Wilder can even survive the multi-hit Scarlet Whirlwind without damage negation, even with his passive. So just if you're a caster, just try to stay away. If you're a melee, just watch out for the attack. Alright, so the Night 2 bosses, I feel like there are a lot more difficult ones in Night 2. I guess that just makes sense. Starting off with the Nameless King. If you have a parry shield, you can parry Nameless King and aura farm. But if you're parrying, you better be good at it because you could get one shot if you don't have enough damage negation, or you could burn flasks. The one attack I want to cover is his Lightning Strike attack, where he targets all 3 players, your whole team at once. This can wipe your team, and a lot of people don't know how to dodge this attack. My biggest tip for this attack is that after he finishes cast, the lightning will take about a second for it to actually strike your character. So you might want to dodge before you actually have to dodge before the lightning before you see the lightning. And the best way to do that is to watch his cast, wait a second, then dodge. Even though you haven't seen the lightning strike you yet, it's gonna strike you like instantly. It's I'm not sure if you can actually dodge this attack by reacting on the visuals at all. The reason why it's important to know this is because one, it strikes your whole team, and two, it's a little bit different than the other mobs like Draconic Tree Sentinel. Draconic Tree Sentinel will instantly cast that lightning strike on you at one person with no delay, while the Nameless King has one delay after the cast. Another common white mechanic is his rock or wind wave swing. I don't know what it's called, but when he does a swing, he'll shove like a wind full of rocks, and to dodge it, you just have to wait for it to reach you and then dodge into it. It does a lot of damage. It has a really large hitbox. It can knock people down pretty often. Next is Ancient Dragon. So, in my opinion, Ancient Dragon is actually pretty easy to deal with, especially in trios. But the reason why he's so annoying is because it has a lot of HP, it has a ton of ailment resistance, and it has extremely high poise to the point where I've never seen his poise broken in my games, only on internet clips. For some reason, he just has busted poise, whatever. If you stick to the legs like any other dragon fights, not too big of a deal. Run away from your fire breaths, not too big of a deal. The one attack that catches a lot of players is his lightning spear attack. So when he goes on his legs, on his hind legs, and then charges up a lightning spear, what you want to do is you want to wait for him to slam the lightning spear, watch that projectile lightning wave that shoots out, and dodge into the wave. And then he's going to do another slam, same thing as well. Once you get used to the attack, Ancient Dragons, no problem. Okay, next boss, Dancer. So Dancer is honestly, Dancer might be harder than the Nameless King in some ways. Um, it's that spin to win attack. It's for a high amount of damage. That spin to win attack is like 5 or 6 hits that you have to dodge in a row if you're trying to actually dodge it. There is a way to dodge it in 2 swings and a surge sprint. If you want to find a video on that, that's fine. If you're range, just try not to get close and surge sprint away. Just another tip, it's actually weak to Holy and not really other elements in Nightreign. Okay, 4th boss, Outland Commander. Commander Neil with his 2 summons and his 2 knights. The summons can ruin runs, but you can clear this consistently fine. It's still, especially for newer players, it's going to be really tough to deal with. He's tough to deal with in the base game too. There are a couple options you have. You can have everyone focus their DPS on the summons, ult spells at the start while avoiding Neil, and get rid of them. Another strategy is you have one person take aggro from Neil, and the other 2 fight the summons and kite them. Range can actually deal with the summons pretty well, especially Iron Eye. You just continue to kite them, move backwards while someone holds aggro on you. If for some reason you're able to keep a Bewitching Branch at this point, you can actually use the Bewitching Branch on the summons, and the summons will attack Neil and make this fight super easy. I recommend not just straight DPSing Neil. I think it's fine to just kill the summons, because Neil is way easier to deal with 3 people. And bursting him down puts you at risk for those summons catching everyone. Last but not least, we have Deathrite Bird. So I included Deathrite Bird because I can think of a very specific game where my teammates didn't know how to dodge like any of his attacks for whatever reasons. And the thing that killed them the most was the ghost flame trails. So a lot of his attacks will leave ghost flame trails in certain patterns. Try not stepping into them. He also looks really spooky, and he's also really aggressive, so that makes him a difficult boss on its own, but he's not too bad if you just pay attention to his ghost flame trails. And there is one attack that could potentially wipe your team, and it's that falling spears attack. So when you start shooting those falling spears, the ground will be highlighted, where they will land. The way to dodge this attack is you have to dodge into the spears that landed on the ground already. Because there's a certain pattern where it goes from far away from the boss all the way to the Deathrite birds standing here. If you're standing here, the spears land here, you dodge into those spears after they land, and then the spears will fall behind you, and he won't shoot any more spears in this area. Not sure if that was helpful, but yeah, dodge into the spears after they land. The pathing section portion of this guide is catered toward newer players, but I wouldn't be making this guide if I wasn't struggling and if other Def 5 players weren't struggling with optimal pathing. If you understand opportunity costs, which is every decision you make takes time, everything you do takes time, like traveling for another flask, doing that blood Evergale at level 3, all of that matters. Even standing at the shop for minutes looking through items can waste a lot of your time. If you look at the limitations, you have 4 minutes and 30 seconds before the first circle starts closing. That level 3 Evergale, it took 1 minute. Now you only have 3 minutes and 30 seconds. So you want to start thinking about time you spend at each POI, and what if you did another POI instead? Could it have given you better rewards, more opportunities? What are the trade-offs of every decision? If you can do that, you can develop your own formula to get to level 15 every time. But most people are here just to queue, hit the boss, get loot. But if you really want to master the game, pathing is super important for getting the best items you can for your teammates, for yourself, and make your runs go way easier. A good sign of optimal pathing is getting 15 every single game for all your teammates, following a general formula without using the Nightreign map that shows you the seeds of where everything's located. You can still win at level 12, 11, 13, 14 just fine. 14 and 15 is not that big of a difference, but 15 is a good sign that you're clearing a bunch of you're clearing a bunch of POIs, and you're getting a bunch of items, giving yourself the best chance to win. If you're getting 15 with Crucible Knights, that doesn't necessarily mean you had good pathing either. My general rule is to focus on Night Invaders, because Night Invader camps are at random locations, whereas Evergales are always around the same locations and they're ever in the map. However, the Night Invader camp could be on the other side of the map. One could be on one side, one could be on the complete opposite side. So you have to adjust your pathing there. Your focus is to get those items and those passive, get damage negation first, and then stack damage or pick up damage passes after. It's not a hard rule. You can get damage early on and kill Night Invaders and do a lot of damage and clear the map faster, but that's the general rule. Another general rule is sometimes it's better to just clear nearby POIs instead of backtracking. One of the things I still, I guess, wasn't optimally doing right was sometimes I was going back to the castle when we already spent a ton of time on day 2 clearing other POIs, and the castle's at the very edge of the ending circle. So if we travel 1 minute to the castle, we only have 2 minutes and 30 seconds before the second circle starts closing, and then we have to run all the way back to the boss. Whereas if I just cleared POIs near the circle, we could have gotten way more runes. We didn't risk dying. We didn't risk losing flasks, the rain. That's something I still learned even at depth 5 when someone with 1,200 hours suggested better path for me. And that 1,200-hour player followed me to my bad path. But then after the circle closed, I was like, wait, he just had a better idea than me. And we spent wait. I didn't think about the time we already spent on day 2. And those are the things you need to think about if you want to master your pathing. So the general formula I use for the base castle map is you clear the base camp, level 2, get to level 2. If you're a Revenant, Recluse, or Duchess, or for whatever reason you need a Sorcerer Rise, it's a good time to get it, especially if it's close by. It's also good to clear some extra mobs, so you might be able to get to level 3 when you clear this small or easy POI. So Cathedral, Forts, Sorcerer Rise, depending on who you have. Now, the next step number 3. So most players on step number 3 are going to ping the Everjail. This is great in the base game, but this can really ruin your runs, or maybe not ruin your runs, but really troll your runs and are suboptimal plays in Deep of Night. If you stuck from the beginning of this guide, you know that Everjails have 65 to 80% more health simply by being the blood version, not including the Deep of Night scaling that goes with it. So most people are still, even at depth 5, most people will be pinging that Everjail. And there are certain Everjails which you can counter and are actually worth your time. But in my opinion, you don't really need to think about doing that Everjail right now. Definitely do it later. For me personally, there's no reason to gamble anything and spend time on day 1 with no items to clear that Everjail for 5% damage and maybe 1 item or passive. But that's not always reality. Um, People will just ping Everjail at level 3 out of habit, and sometimes it actually works out well if you get one of the easy mobs, like the Grave Warden Duelist, Bloodhound Knight, and Omen. Even the blood versions are fine. But if it's the blood version of something else, like the Red Banished Knights, hopefully your teammates at this point will realize it's not worth fighting, and you can either go back to it later or never go back to it. In my opinion, you shouldn't even open the Everjail's check, but some people don't care because it's just 1 key. But honestly, in my opinion, it's just not worth doing an Everjail at level 3 in Deep of Night, especially if you don't have items, especially if your casters don't have items. There are ways to counter Everjails with like ailments like Executor and Wilder can do, but I wouldn't recommend it. In actuality, people are going to do Everjail. You might be better off helping your teammate doing that Everjail. But if you can, I would highly recommend not doing Everjail right now. For the actual step 3, I'd recommend going to a Night Invader or Cataclysm camp if it's in your half of the map. Contrary to the Everjail meta, the Night Invader meta actually gets better than the Everjail meta at depths 4 and 5 and in Deep of Night in general. That's because you're guaranteed at least 1 camp, and at depth 3, 4, 5, there's a greater chance you get 2 camps. And then I'll go into the relic line later, but most of you know you can get plus 7% damage from Night Invader, each Night Invader that you kill. But the reason why they're worth doing right now is because they're actually relatively easy compared to everything else that gets scaled in the game for your time. A lot of newer players are scared of Night Invaders, and sometimes Night Invaders can wipe your team, especially if you're inexperienced or whatever. But I would suggest you learn how to clear them no matter what depth or what experience you have in the game, because they do become really easy, especially if you have the relic line. Defeating enemies fills more of your ultimate, charges your ultimates. You can have your ultimate ready up, and you can kill these Night Invaders at level 2 with nothing and just space weapon. The reason why Night Invaders do become the meta is because they give you a ton of runes. They don't scale that much in HP, You can gank them with 3 players, especially. You have ultimates to deal with them, and they can shoot your power with the relic line, and give you a ton of runes, and give you really important passives like successive damage negation on successive attacks. At the purple level, which is 60%, you can get full damage negation at full HP, 40%, and you can use those starter weapons, which are already purple, but they don't have a level requirement. And the reason why you want to do them early, another reason why, is you might not backtrack to where you started, depending on the seed. So, and the Night Vader camps are random in location, so you want to take care of them if they're nearby, because you'll have less flexibility with all these circles closing to get to them later, unlike the Everjails, which are everywhere on the map. If they're on the opposite side of the map, you can just clear an easy camp, ruins, field boss, or 2 while you're on the way. You could get a smithing stone, which, by the way, gives you a 20% increase from blue to purple in damage. But even that is optional as well. You could get it later. And then for the step 4, not step 5, is the castle. So I want to say about 90% of the time, you want to clear the castle day 1. The reason why you want to clear your castle day 1 is because there are a bunch of chests where you can get loot from. There's a talisman chest. There are so many enemies and bosses that can give you those dormant drops, which can give you a passive, an item, and they're all in one collocated location in the middle of the map. And most of the time, the circle will close outside of the castle, except for certain seeds where it will cut off the castle. So if you skip doing an Everjail at level 3, you might have time to clear the most of the castle before the circle even closes, or while it's closing. That's one advantage of skipping the Everjail at level 3. But there's just so many drop opportunities, even by the chests, and all the dormant powers that you can get from killing trolls, banished knights, crucible knights. And you can get to level 10 pretty easily if you clear all of the important mobs in the castle. Sometimes the circle or the seed will completely cut off the castle, and you might be running late for whatever reason. You did do that level 3 Everjail, it took a lot of time, blah blah blah. You died to Night Invaders, whatever. It's okay to just leave the castle entirely, and not do it on day 1. If it's cut off from the castle, you could just do other easy POIs. This is where doing stuff like camps can still give you like 10, 12 items from all the red mobs, give you good items from the blood bosses, and you can also do Everjails for some damage there, because you have really no choice if the castle gets cut off. And even though the castle is really important to do on day 1, if there's a really difficult boss in the basements, you might be better off just killing like the trolls, banished knights, or crucible knights first, then level up, and then deal with the blood wolf or bill bearing hunter later. That's fine too. You can also hit the castle at level 3 or 4. You just go focus on the trolls, banished knights, crucible knights, and then focus on the bosses after. There are a bunch of chests in the castle, and a lot of people skip opening them. It is worth opening these chests because they can also drop red items, blue items, purple items. They won't give you good stuff all the time, but they have the bigger chests, like the decorated chests. I don't know what to call them. They have a pretty good chance of giving you those items, and even the plain wooden chests can give you some decent passives as well. After you finish clearing the castle, you might have time to clear like an easy POI, like Everjail, before the rain goes all the way to the final circle. Just be careful about creating in the rain, because if you die on the outside of the circle, right as the circle finishes closing, you might just lose the run outright, unless you have someone alive in the circle. And if you're in the rain for too long, you won't have class to help you clear the first boss. In the base game, it's not really a problem because the scaling is pretty easy, but in Deep of Nights, having those flasks are really important for certain night bosses, especially. Sometimes it's just not worth squeezing more POI. Another tip is you can suicide outside the circle for a fast refresh, but again, be careful with this. If someone else isn't alive, then the run will just end. You can all die if the circle is just closing, but not if the circle is about to close. And you clear the night 1 boss, you should be around level 8 to 12 at this point. 12 being Crucible Knights or efficient clearing of the castle. Or if you have a high DPS team comp, because that factors in on how many POIs you can clear as well. Okay, another reason why it's super important to do the castle on day 1 is because you have the flexibility of going wherever you want day 2 for good items or increasing your damage. The rune's really dense in items and rewards. It is so worth your time. But now that you've cleared most of the dormant powers, you don't even have to go back. You can go back to finish up stuff later, but hopefully you cleared most of it day 1, and now you can do whatever the heck you want. If there is a Night Invader camp that you didn't clear on day 1 because it's on the other side of the map, now is the time to path for that in mind first. Because the reason why you want to path for this first, again, is because of the circle closing. I think in day 2, you get 3 minutes and 30 seconds before the second circle starts closing, which is different than 4 minutes and 30 seconds for the first day. Next, you probably want to target the Blood, Formidable, or the Great Bosses. If you referenced the scaling chart earlier, the Formidable bosses only gets a plus 15% increase, while the regular mini bosses give you 80%. But there still might be worth clearing on the way because they're really easy and you probably have items to clear them. And now is a really good time to do Evergeos. Now that you've taken care of your Night Invader camps, you've done maybe 1 or 2 bosses. Now is the perfect time to do Evergeos because now you have the items to deal with those tough Evergeos. So the Ancient Beasts, you might have an AoE spell, you can wipe them all out. You have damage ups from your Night Invaders probably. If you don't have damage up from your Night Invaders, you have good items with good damage ups or passives that you picked up along the way. The Evergails that take you maybe 1 or 2 minutes on day 1 now take you 30 seconds on day 2. It's a great way to scale, and especially if you have all your damage negation items, no reason not to do Evergails at this point. Well, I guess the only reason if you don't have anyone with the Evergail relic, which is possible. I personally run only the Night Invader one and not both. I would run Evergail if I had a better relic, but Night Invader is all I need. If you don't have good items, it might be better to do regular camps and focus on clearing red mobs. Hopefully you have some decent items so that you can clear red mobs way quicker than you could on day 1. You're looking for less likely to be targeted for Everdark Libra. You're looking for damage negation at full HP, successive attacks, blah blah blah. Evergails only give you 1 item or 1 passive and some runes, and that plus 5% damage for people with the relic. If you clear a regular camp, there's likely going to be like maybe 5, 6, 7, 8 red mobs that you can kill. You can open the chests. The boss itself might be a red mob, and you have 10 times the opportunities of getting a decent item or passive than doing an Evergail. So while regular camps kind of suck in the base game, they become really great with all the red mobs that come with them. And opening the chest can even give you like a dormant drop where you can select an item. So now that you focus on all these things, you should be around 14 to 15. Might be able to squeeze some extra POIs as circles closing, calculate your risks. I did skip over getting a flask. In general, 2 flasks should be enough for you to clear. It might not be worth getting that 3rd flask because traveling takes time. But 2 flasks is enough. That'll bring you to 6 at the end of the night too. Lastly, just learn your movesets for night 2 bosses. You can lose runs that way. Also, don't forget to just clear red mobs while you're going on the way, because they could just drop you the full damage negation at full HP straight up. For the next portion of the pathing section, I'm going to go over the formula for shifting Earths. The only thing different about shifting Earths is the day 2 pathing. You can do certain shifting Earths like Noklateo on day 1, but wouldn't recommend doing it in Deep of Night in particular. But it is definitely viable in the base game. So most of this is going to be focusing on day 2. It's just the reason why it's focusing on day 2 is just because how the circle ends on day 2, and you're pretty much kind of forced into doing the POIs anyway. And there's usually a pretty good benefit of clearing the POI instead of focusing on the base map only. For the crater, you want to, after the night 1 boss, you want to finish any remaining POIs. You might need to return to the castle because you weren't able to clear it fully on day 1. You might want to do one more Everjail. You might want to kill a Night Invader camp. You might want to get some more items. You don't really want to get a Smithing Stone because clearing the POI gives you a legendary Smithing Stone. I prefer to start heading to the crater before the first circle of day 2 starts closing. If we look back here, maybe I should change the wording on this, but you have 3 minutes and 30 seconds before the first circle closes on day 2. So you don't want to spend too much time on the base map when you're in Shifting Earth. So clear the castle, finish up anything you need to grab, and then I recommend after like 1 or 2 minutes, start heading to the Shifting Earth early. The reason why I recommend going early is because you're probably not going to be able to clear all of the bosses or POIs that you need to do in the Shifting Earth anyway, if you go right when the first circle of the second day starts closing. So you'll likely enter from the castle or somewhere over here. You can path your way, spirit stream up, and get this church. You could get this church later, but most people are gonna arrive kind of late, and they're not gonna go early to the POI like I usually prefer to do. So you might want to just grab it while you're here. You drop down from the church, and you go underneath. There's like a little column or pillar that you have to climb through. You circle around, kill all the mini bosses. You kill the magma worm at the very bottom. You upgrade your weapons to legendary. And by the way, you can't upgrade the red weapons to legendary, so some might argue it's not really worth going down here, but just in case, you might as well just clear the magma worm for the runes, the drop, and upgrade something else in your inventory that could be upgraded to legendary. Okay, now you're at step 3. You're going to take this spirit bird all the way back, and this is where the circle ends. If you went early, and if you have a decent damage composition, you can take this spirit bird and go all the way back to the beginning of the POI, and you have several options here. You could kill the Valiant Gargoyle, and you can kill the Falling Star Beast, or you could go back up to the church again. You could take the spirit stream and jump up to the Red Wolf, kill the Red Wolf, kill the Demi-Human. If you're running late and the circle's already closing, the best you can do is probably kill the Demi-Human Queen and kill the rest of the mobs that are near the Spirit Bird. But if you went early, you can definitely get the Red Wolf and the Demi-Human Queen, or the Valiant Gargoyle. That's pretty much it for the crater. As for the mountaintops, same thing here. After night 1 boss, finish up anything you need. Finish up the castle, get another flask, maybe even get a smithing stone. And I always try to head early to the POI before the first circle of day 2 starts closing. The mods are pretty easy in Mountaintop. but I still prefer to go early for that reason. But a lot of players are just going to go once the circle starts closing into the POI. If that's the case, it's fine. You might want to skip a POI or two just so you can clear the ice dragon. So starting from 1, you can kill the Snowfield Troll, you can kill the Flying Dragon and get anti-dragon effects or a good item. Run all the way to Demi-Human Swordmaster to kill him. You skip this because the dragon will fly away. You go to the POI, you get the anti-dragon effect. You get some frostbite resistance while you're here. Kill the dragon for a guaranteed legendary item and a bunch of runes. And you have a couple options here. If you went really early and you have a high DPS team, you can just go straight up to the giant crows, go back down to this demi-human swordmaster, and then kill the snowfield trolls. But usually people are tight on time when they kill the dragon, and they just kill the snowfield trolls. If you do that, you can also kill some mobs that are around the spirit stream in the mountain, and then finish up on the circle here. Okay, for Noklateo, it's a little bit more different than all the other shifting eras. You want to head for Noklateo right after you kill the Night 1 boss, like 99% of the time. There's several reasons for this. Noklateo gives you a bunch of chances for legendary or good items in general. I'll go over them as I pass through. And Astel gives you guaranteed legendaries, stuff like that. That one Everjail or that one blood boss probably isn't worth. If I had my choice, I would say it's never worth your time to do an Everjail on day 2 or do a blood boss outside because of how densely packed Noklateo is with items. Yes, you could get 5 to 10% more damage from an Everjail, but the items and the POIs you're missing out from doing Noklateo, it's just too much to give up, and those items can give you way more DPS than anything any of your relics can give you. So that's why I recommend, as soon as you kill the Night 1 boss, head straight to Noklateo. There is rarely ever a situation where you want to waste time on day 2. Maybe if you had a Night Invader camp, because they're really competitive in drops, runes, and damage. But hopefully you cleared them both on day 1. You might have to give up that Night Invader camp if it's way too far away and you weren't able to clear it day 1. Okay, so going through the pathing, assuming you took one of the spirit birds, you should be around here. You enter in, go to the right or left side, depending on how you look on this map. Kill this Mausoleum Knight, go to this Grace. You head to this Black Knife Assassin, which is under this building structure. After you kill the Black Knife Assassin, you can take this Spirit Stream jump, and you can jump onto the building that you were just under, and there will be a chest that can give you a guaranteed purple item or a legendary item. And you don't have to do anything. You just have to jump up, open the chest, kill one mob that's guarding it. Not even a boss mob. And then not shown on this picture is there is one more Mausoleum Knight at the edge of path 3, which you have to jump over from this building. It's not great in this drawing here, but there is one more Mausoleum Knight on the building that is next to where you open. After you kill that Mausoleum Knight at the top of the building, you go down and kill the Royal Revenant, which is underneath the city. After you kill the Royal Revenant, you kill another Mausoleum Knight that's here guarding the Grace. And then you can kill Astel. So, Astel will give you a free revive if you clear the boss. And you can open that chest at the end of the POI after killing him. He will also give you a guaranteed legendary item. But if you're an inexperienced player or your team comp is not like a high DPS comp, you didn't get good items, you might be really tight on time here. Try your best to clear them. If it's really bad, you might have to run. But if you're pathing correctly, you should have no issue clearing Astel, but stuff happens. Once you clear Astel, there's several options. There's 2 different options you can take here. This is going to depend on what items you already have and how much damage your team can do and how much time you have left over in day 2. you really have to think about that circle closing in as a factor into where you go on this last pathing path. If anyone on your team or you has a full damage negation at full HP, I would highly recommend just going Black Knife Assassin, kill the Black Knife Assassin, go duplicate that damage negation for yourself, for your teammates, or less likely to be targeted for Everdark Libra. And there's saying bird in hand worth whatever in the bush, I don't know. But just get that damage negation at full HP now. The reason why I'm recommending that path, if you already have good items, is because you might be running tight on time where you can't take this other path 6, where you go kill the Dragonkin Soldier, you jump up here, you kill the Headless Troll, you kill the Black Knife Assassin, then you duplicate. By the time you do this, you might not have time to duplicate because there are a bunch of mobs that need to be cleared in here, and the circle might be closing already. However, if you have a really strong team in your trio, then you could just go kill the Dragonkin Soldier, you can kill the Headless Troll, you can kill the Black Knife, you can duplicate. You just got 3 more items that give you better chances of getting a good item if you didn't have any good items. And then some teams might even go out and kill this Flying Dragon at the edge of the map. Some runs I do end up doing this with Wilder, Recluse, and me as Revenant, but it doesn't happen that often. Usually I focus on this weapon duplication POI. So just think about how much time you've already spent and how much damage you guys can do as a team. Okay, so Rotted Woods is just like the Mountaintops, and just like the other one, Crater, but it's slightly different with its padding. I also recommend you clear Rotted Woods. You start to head towards Rotted Woods before the first circle of day 2 starts closing. Hopefully, you cleared the castle on day 1 and you picked up anything you wanted to do, but if you didn't clear castle day 1, you can clear it real quickly and then head to the Rotted Woods. That's no big deal, it's pretty flexible. For me, there's rarely ever a time I really want to clear a mini or great boss outside of the woods because there are already a bunch of bosses here, and there are a bunch of mini mobs here that you can clear for runes. There are certain exceptions. If there's no blood bosses in the woods, then maybe it is better to clear a blood or red boss outside of the woods. So once you get familiar with the game, a lot of players will find the Rotted Woods buff by process of elimination instead of opening the Discovery POI at this castle. Why do players do this? Well, it's if you think about pathing and opportunity costs, it takes maybe like 30 seconds to a minute to walk up all the way to this castle, to open the POI, to clear any mobs in the way, and then you have to travel back to a boss. Since there are 3 locations where the buff could be, and you can spot it from very far away, you can find where the location is or determine where it is by process of elimination with spotting 2 areas. Why you want to do process of elimination? Well, it's because you can just clear bosses around this area. You know the buff is not here, so it has to be here or here. Then you can adjust your pathing to clear bosses around here. If it's not here, you know you can just run over here and grab the buff. That could save you 30 seconds. That 30 seconds or a minute you could spent going to this castle, you could have cleared another boss with for a better item, for more runes. And it's really not that difficult to use this process of elimination to find that buff because they're always in the same spot. Well, they're always what it could be in one of these 3 spots. It has to be in one of these 3 spots. And you can spot them far away. You can eliminate 2 of them pretty easily. Another reason why this buff is really important because it gives you max HP and partial HP restoration on damage, but for me, the most important part of it is that it increases your vigor and HP. And that lets you tank a lot more, it makes your damage negations more valuable, and all that good stuff. For the relic section of the guide, I'm going to be covering core lines that are really good and deep with knights that you can apply to any builds and don't require too much RNG. I'm not going to be focusing on combos like Everjail Invader or specialized builds, but I'll cover them here with some numbers. And most of this is napkin math, but napkin math can get you pretty far, and you don't really need to dive into the specifics to get a good idea of what you can combine for the best setup. I spent most of this guide trying to convince you that relics aren't that important, but they do matter and they do impact your game. You can start your game with passives that can help you in varying different ways. So it's still a part of this important part of this guide in its own way. I just want to start off with a disclaimer that damage means nothing. Damage here means nothing if you can't dodge your boss mechanics and you can't weave attacks. To make an argument that having really high output from your damage relics will make your runs easier because you're hitting the boss more, the boss is depleting more. But in order to do that, you need to be able to dodge your boss mechanics, you need some RNG, and all of that. If you look at clip number 6, that was when we only had 2 Everjails and 1 Invader, and we were still hunting down Everdark Gnoster, and we broke Everdark Gnoster's stance with just 2 Everjails, 1 Night Invader, not by choice, by the way. Unlucky with the depth 5 Night Invader camp. And we're just mowing down on Animus here with not that much damage ups. I'm not doing that much as a Revenant. Against Animus itself, I'm only doing maybe 1,000 per cast, but all 3 of us are just hunting down Everdark Gnoster, and with no relics, the result would have been the same, maybe just slightly slower. But, like I said, they do matter, and a lot of people have questions about relics, and a lot of people want to min-max their builds, which is perfectly fine, so I'll go into them. My first number 1 recommended relic line would be attack power increase for each Night Invader. This line is not that great in the base game because there's chances of not even getting a Night Invader camp or a Cataclysm, same name. But in depths 3, 4, and 5, there's a pretty good chance you get 2 camps or 2 POIs, which can get you 2 to 4 invaders. At depth 1, you're at least guaranteed 1 camp, so you can at least get 7 or 14% damage up. And why damage ups are important is because every multiplier, well, almost every multiplier in the game is multiplicative with your cumulative damage or with others. So what I mean by that is if you kill 1 Night Invader, it'll increase your damage from 100 to 107. And then the next Night Invader stack you get, or the next Invader you kill, it will multiply that 107 by 7% again, and it'll bring you all the way to 22. So even though you got 21% of damage from your stacks, you actually got 22% more damage. And you can imagine with specialized builds, people with edited or cheated relics, they can make their damage go through the roof. Or if you're just playing RNI Recluse Duchess, you don't need that crazy of relics to get 2 times your damage. But like I mentioned earlier, I think 1.4 times or 1.3 times is just a good enough balance if you're trying to shoot for survivability, because getting down will destroy your team's DPS. But if you're all 3 hitting the boss consistently, you have good items, so you can confidently weave attacks, you can clear just fine with 1.4, 1.3, 1.2, even no relics. If you get lucky with relics, you can speed run the game with getting relics that will boost your damage all the way up to 2 times. And especially if you have a trio, you can spam Everjails and Night Invaders, but I'll go into that. For me, my number 1 favorite core line is attack power increase for each Night Invader. So there is some variance with this relic, but most of the time you're going to get 3 or 4 invaders at depths 3, 4, and 5. Usually with 4 and 5, but there is maybe like a 5% chance you only get 1 camp, which will only give you 1 or 2 invaders. But the reason why this line is so good in Deep of Night is because simply clearing the invaders will give you a bunch of items with good passive, like Executor's Blade can give you plus 16%, plus 60% successive attacks, and that might be all you need as a melee in depth 5. You could get full damage negation at full HP plus 40%. You can get the starter weapons at purple grade or even red grade, and they don't have any level requirement. It only takes about 30 seconds to a minute to kill invaders with people who are decently experienced. Newer players might struggle a bit. Newer players might be scared, but I would go for them anyway. Even if you wipe, the amount of runes you get for your time is still a lot more than anything else in this game mode. But the catch with this line is that it requires you to get a relic with that line, and there is no way to guarantee it right now at the time of this guide. Chances are, if you're a newer player, you don't have it. It's fine if you don't have it going through depths 1 to 3. Scaling is fair enough, and that's where attack power increase for each Everjail prisoner defeated comes in. This is really great for depths 1 to 3 because a lot of people will be doing Everjails because that's just the meta for the base game. It can really boost your damage. But for me, it's substitutable, and I don't currently run this line because I don't have the best relics with this. For me, I still view this as a 10 to 15% damage up on my random queues for depth 5. You can replace 10% damage elsewhere with pretty much anything else. You can get damage ups in games. But they are a ticket to doing a ton of DPS, and they have a potential of going. And this line has a potential of giving 60% if you clear 6 Everjails. But the games where I focus on Night Invaders, I don't have time to clear 6 Everjails with random people, random teammates, random characters, random relics. And in Deep of Night 4 to 5, it's really important that you get your damage negation passives to consistently win and make your Night Lord fights that much easier. This is just some more math, some more ranting. Everjails have opportunity costs. How important is that 5% damage in one item or passive versus a camp that could give you 10 items or one passive and 10 items and no damage? Those 10 items could give you way more damage than one more plus 5% Evergale line. So just think about the opportunity costs. Think about the right times where you're not spending so much time on clearing a red Evergale instead of doing a camp, which will get you way more items. And I've covered in the guide previously, but stuff like Everdark Libra with less likely to be targeted, you get less chances for that if you're spamming Everjails. But on the contrary, you do get more DPS to deal with the Condemned. And like I said, just more ranting. I'll be straight up, I really don't like this line that much in Deep of Nights because of the Night Invaders giving so much damage, and them spawning in random places makes pathing a little bit more difficult. But this is still a great line, and it applies to all your weapons. It's not school specific. It applies to all your attacks. It's great when done at the right time. Here's just some more aftermath. Let's say you have 3 Everjails, 3 Night Invaders. My Charge Lightning Spear does 600. Still do 850 if I have both, but if I only have Night Invader, it's 735. But blah blah blah, I don't care that much right now about it because I know if I want to do more DPS against Fulghor, I need to hit my Lightning Spears because it's really hard to hit Lightning Spears against Fulghor. And I'm okay with just the Night Invader damage up and some incantations up. But a lot of people will stack school-specific spells for Recluse and Duchess because you can increase your damage way higher than any other class can do in damage, like a Dragon Cult's Revenant, but the Revenant has to get Dragon Cult incants, while Recluse and Duchess can get Shattering Crystal pretty easily with your help and the Sorcerer Rises, and yes, all of these stackings of damage can make the boss fights that much easier. If you do so, just make sure you don't fall down. My number 3, or maybe this line could go to number 1, This is an extremely underrated line that you might not be aware of as a newer player. Some people might skip this because it doesn't apply to a lot of the Night Lord fights. It's great for Everdark Libra, where the Condemned will charge your ults when they die on their own. And it does help you with certain night bosses like Freya, but I don't think you should look at this line that way. Um, the reason being is certain classes or characters get really buff with this line. Like, you're able to clear so much more during the day with the help of this line, combining your ultimate for Iron Eye, Duchess, Wilder, Revenant, Guardian, even Recluse and Raider can benefit from it. Iron Eye is just way too broken. I feel like this line might be mandatory for almost mandatory for Iron Eye. You can live without it, but the more stuff you kill, the more passes you get. There are a bunch of red mobs in the camps. Iron Eye can just wipe out a bunch of them. Revenant can buff your teammates and keep them alive for 15 seconds, where you can just Unga Boonga DPS the bosses and clear them faster. It helps you kill the Night Invaders, which are scary for newer players. There's just so much good of this line that'll help you during the day that'll set you up for the Night Lord fight, even though it might not apply. Alright, next we'll be going into the Maris Relic, which counts as +5 Vigor and Vigor increase max HP in general. So, a lot of people will not run Vigor because they feel as if they're just going to get one shot anyway, especially at depth 5. However, I still prefer to run hybrid builds, even though Vigor won't be the only reason that you survive at depth 5. There's a bunch of numbers here, but sum it up, some bosses at depth 5 can probably hit for around 2,000 to 3,000 damage. There's other factors like affinity damage negation, physical damage negation. Some characters have more damage negation than others. Even with full vigor at depth 5, my Revenant won't be able to survive most hits from the Night Lord. But I still prefer running it. One, because I don't have the best relics. I have some pretty solid relics, but not ones with Evergale, not ones with incants, which are due to RNG. So I still slot the Maris relic on my Revenant, and I'm still looking for Vigor. Now that you know, some bosses at depth 5 can hit about 2,000, 3,000. Sometimes they'll hit lower than that if it's a really light attack, but I'll just assume they do 2,000 on average. So my base Revenant has 780 HP. If I have a damage negation at full HP plus 40%, the boss is going to do roughly 1,200 damage. I'm dead. If I have two of them, it's going to do 560 damage. I'm still alive. That's great. That's assuming no other variables like affinity damage negation, physical damage negation that you can pick up from passes from the bosses, or you can even have on your relic. If I slot around 8 to 9 vigor, I'm going to end up with 1,000 HP with no more passive at level 15. In order for me to survive that 2,000 damage hits, I need around 50 to 60% total damage negation. So one damage negation at full HP plus 40% still wouldn't save me with 1,000 HP against that attack. But there are many different ways you can get damage negation from the game, either from the relics or from drops from mobs. So in a way, I am kind of gambling that I will get something else to help me out besides one damage at full HP, which could be around 32 or 40%. And there's a small safety net that I can get from just stacking as much affinity damage negation or physical damage negation throughout the day so that I can tank at least one hit. But there's still games where I wouldn't say the vigor doesn't matter, but it can really only help me with those light attacks, and I pretty much do have to go hitless or don't make many mistakes and only get 2 barred. So that's why some people prefer Evergale and Vader. There's just like a Reddit thread here debating whether people should pick up Maris, and there's other reasons like you can top off your health with the continuous HP recovery. Some people don't have good relics. This guy doesn't run without Night Invader and Everjail and character skill, but just get the combo of character skill and Everjail, right? I have one of those relics, um, but the character skill wasn't good, and it doesn't really matter which way you go. Some classes are better going Glass Cannon. As Revenant, I don't have tools for iframes, but as Recluse, I have tools for max HP. I have a longer iframe than most classes. As Aranai, I can get 2 extra iframes to my mark, and I'm usually at a distance, so just based on your playstyle, adjust your relics. I wouldn't recommend going full vigor, because if you go full vigor or full defense, your teammates kind of have to make up for that damage loss with all the buffs that the Deep of Night bosses gets, and you are going to be clearing POIs and such at a slower pace. So just consider that if you do go full vigor. There are Revenants that go full vigor that can get to 9999, but your teammates will have to pick up the slack a bit in your damage. Um, all of this analysis is at depth 5, but at depth 3, there are many games where I could just tank going full vigor and not need a damage negation at all. So, based on your experience playing depth 3, 4, or 5, just try and do the napkin math and estimate whether vigor is worth slotting. I still do recommend a hybrid build, and like I said, I don't really think relics matter that much from depths 1 to 3, and I really like depths 3 because it's a good balance of the game, in my opinion. But yeah, I would say vigor is still useful. Still try to fit in some damage in there so that you can make it easier on your teammates. Yeah, just make your own builds. Plenty of people run Everjail, Night Invader, Glass Cannons. Plenty of people run hybrid. Some people run full vigor. So just pick up what works for you and don't die if you go Glass Cannon. Another line that I recommend for most casters is max FP increase for each Sorcerer Rise unlocked. It gives you plus 18% FP for each one. And you're probably going to want to open up a Sorcerer Rise if you have a Duchess or Revenant, because you need those Starlight Shards, and sometimes there are not that many ways of getting Starlight Shards. You can survive without this line, but it does make everything way more comfortable. There are a few games where I'm pathing for Night Invaders, and I just can't get that Sorcerer Rise. You can also use Dark Knight otherwise if you don't have good relics. It has that built in and has max HP. I mean max FP already. And then after these lines, I would recommend general damage buffs like incantations up, sorceries up, affinity damage up, physical attack up. Just having a few of these will help you a bunch at depth 5 scaling. You don't need to have perfect relics. You don't need to have 2 times damage off the bats. You don't need cheated relics. Just having like maybe 1.3, 1.4 times be perfectly fine. If you feel like you're not clearing depth 5 because not everyone else is running Everjail and Invader, then it's probably because you or your teammates aren't good at weaving in attacks. I think I referenced clip 6 earlier, but in clip 6 we only had 2 Everjails and 1 Night Invader. And we're stance breaking Animus, and it was no issue for us. If we had full Everjails and Night Invader, it would have gone faster, but I have no idea whether my teammates are going to be experienced or not, or if I need to carry. It doesn't really matter because we're all familiar with the boss mechanic. And this Night Invader wasn't by choice. We only got 1 camp, and we only got 1 Night Invader due to RNG. That's why I really recommend these general damage ups, but even with these general damage ups, certain classes like Revenant with the Strength Relic, I might be using the Fire Candlestick against Caligo, or I might be using the Golden Order Greatsword, bunch of different alternative weapons that wouldn't get buffed by incantations, and that's where Everjail and Night Invader shines, because it applies to all of your attacks. That's also where affinity damage kind of shines, but it only boosts your affinity damage, but it's still a solid line to have. Um, and of course, there are stacking for specific tools, especially a very meta build is Shattering Crystal. Personally, I get really bored playing Shattering Crystal, but if you're just trying to climb to 9999 as Recluse or Duchess, Shattering Crystal is very viable because of those Sorcerer Rise and because your teammates can get you that drop and bosses can get you that drop. But as for Revenants, I'm not gonna want to do Dragon Cults or Fundamentalists because Dragon Cults only buffs the Lightning Incant. And there are games where I don't see a single Lightning Incant. And it doesn't buff the Dragon Communion, which are the Dragon Breaths. And the Fundamentalist line only works for Discus of Light and Triple Rings of Light. Maybe more with the DLC, but I can go 10 to 12 games without seeing Discus of Light. So I'm just not going to rely on those lines, and I just prefer to have incantations up. And when I don't use incantations, I still use them in the day, but I might not use them in the Night Lord. That's fine. It still helps me out with clearing in the day. It's no big deal if I don't have incantations for the Night Lord. And last, I'm not going to cover specific class-specific relics for the skills, passive, ultimates. Just throw that out there. For Revenant, I just can't live without Ghost Flame, Explosion, and the Strength and Reduce Faith relic. I tried all the other ones, but they're just for niche situations, whatever. Even with these two relics, I could win probably just the same amounts without these two relics, but I always don't have a good time playing without them. So, I mean, I guess it's just not fun playing without these two for me. Certain classes like Iron Eye and Walder get really good skill boosts, so +1 additional skill usage would help with Walder's hookshot, triggering successive bubbles, mobility. Iron Eye gets another iframe, another mark. Pick based on what you have, how you want to play. There are better guides that are specifically help you with your class. And yeah, just go look for those. I'm not going to cover them here. And this is just me ranting about cheaters with edited relics, still 3-barring at depth 5, using damage to try and compensate for lack of skill, and they still need to be carried, blah blah blah. Don't die. This last section here is just some extra information with some of my player stats. I mentioned that I didn't reach 999 right away. It took me about a month to go from depth 5, reaching depth 5, to going to 9999. Some people go on win streaks from depth 5 and go straight to 9999, but for me, it still took me a while because I had to play after work. And I have around 600 hours at the time of making this guide. I'm probably going to have a lot more because I love playing this game. A lot of this information was from other players, me camping Reddit for the new tricks. And one of the main reasons why I made this guide is because those tricks are scattered everywhere, and I'm just trying my best to include as many of them as possible. I'm really trying to trigger maybe like a butterfly effect. If a few people read this guide, a few more randoms are going to learn from those people who read the guide, who learned one tip, and the knowledge spreads fast, like Revenant's Claws and all the other meta stuff. My best win streaks are 20, not at 999, but just 20 overall from depth 4 to depth 5. And then my second best win streak was at 19, where I lost it to Fulghor of all bosses. But stuff happens, and most of the time I just had 10 out of 18 useful lines. I didn't run Everjail and Night Invader. I only ran that combo for about 2 games. I just prefer having Vigor with me and giving my best chance at survival. Here was the relic setup I used for most of my games to 999, and at 999, my relics got slightly better, but we have the max FP, we have Vigor, Ghost Flame Explosion, Night Invader for some damage, Vigor, Stamina, useless, beating enemies fills more of the art gauge, amazing, but this madness buildup cost me Everdark Libra aura form, so I took it off. Improve Infinity Attack Power, one of my favorites. Incantations +2, 10%, one of my favorites. Lightning, not that useful, but it helps with Adel, I guess. I really like the max HP line, and I'm a big fan of the improved strength and reduced faith, and it helps Revenant deal with bad RNG and lets you melee and use the melee skills. Really fun. These are kind of, I mean, Flask Heal's allies is kind of useful, especially as Revenant, but I could go without it. Improve Madness, whatever. I do have one of those crazy Everdark Invader Relic setups, but I've only run it 2 times. Reason being is, at the time of this guide, this Revenant skill, which gives you continuous HP recovery while Helen is out, 10% damage when Frederick's out, and 20% damage negation when Sebastian's out, seems great, except for the fact that depth 5, Frederick dies in like 5 to 10 seconds, so it's a 10% damage buff for 5 to 10 seconds. So I could care less about that. It does help a bit, but not as much as I want it to. And then there's improved fundamentalist incantations. Again, I can go 10 to 12 games without seeing Discs of Light or Triple Rings of Light. So I'm just not going to rely on this line. And Evergel is a nice line, but if the other 2 lines are not that useful, I'd rather have something else. I've also recently changed my relics. I mean, they're not that different. I went back to the Mars relic because I don't want to have to top off my HP with more flasks. I have a nice line here that helps with restoring health for some of my teammates if you kill enemies, but not that useful in my opinion. And then I have one of those prized skill plus Night Invader lines, and it just looks way nicer than my setup that I use, which has missing lines and a Wilder skill. And then I also upgraded my improved strength, reduced faith. I got a plus 5% increase in incantations, but I'm still looking for like a vigor here or something like that. But like I said, I could run this Evergale Night Invader combo no problem. I'd probably just win around the same amount, but I just prefer to be lazy and have some vigor to back me up on my laziness. On average, I get like 1.4 times just from my relics alone, but that doesn't factor in the items I get. And I'm just happy with that damage amount. My first F5 game was on September 27th. Took me a month to reach 9999. Here's my battle record. It's still 2 weeks out of date. I'm still playing the game. I'm still trying to get better. Some more closing thoughts. I don't think anyone really cares about that, but if you're curious, you can check it out.